Good afternoon, everyone. So I am Gerald Sigananshal. In this video, we will discuss another feminist theorist and its criticism. Her name is Susan Bordo. Right. Let us first know who is Susan Bordo. Right. So Susan Bordo is an American philosopher working in contemporary cultural studies with a particular focus on feminist theory. Her scholarship examines the interaction of culture and the body, addressing topics such as eating disorders, including anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, plastic surgery, ideals of beauty, racism and the body, masculinity, and sexual harassment. Right, so Susan Bordo, it is a prominent figure in the field of feminism because he tackles about the ideals, body types, the ideals of beauty, the racism, and of course the masculinity and sexual harassment faced by um, women and of course other genders in our society. All right, uh, Susan Bordo was born in Newark, New Jersey, in the United States. He was graduated in the State University of New York at Stony Brook, where she obtained her degree in philosophy in 1982. Her occupations include author. She was an author, philosopher, and of course, she was a professor. And of course, she was an employer of University of Kentucky, and she was known for feminist philosophy. All right, so we have here the overview of her work. So Bordo's work contributes to feminist, cultural, and gender studies, focusing on the connections between consumer culture and the construction of gendered bodies. So here are the theoretical contexts that Susan Bordo was rooted on, in which she gained into its theoretical foundation. First one, we have the philosophical discourse. So Bordo's writing aims to engage audiences beyond the academic sphere while remaining firmly rooted in theoretical frameworks. Her work draws on philosophical discourse to examine issues such as rationality, objectivity, and mind-body dualism, situating the body within historical and cultural context. Alright, so Bordeaux argues that throughout history, the body has been constructed as separate from the true self, variously conceived as soul, mind, spirit, will, creativity, or freedom, and as an entity that undermines the effort of that self. She traces the concept of the body to writers such as Plato, Augustine of Hippo, and the authors of the Bible, which have portrayed the body as animalistic, appetitive, deceptive, and the prison of the soul. So Bordos has examined the dualistic nature of the mind-body relationship through the philosophies of Aristotle, George Wilhelm, Friedrich Hegel, and René Descartes. She has analyzed how binary such as spirit or matter and male activity or female passivity have historically reinforced gender roles and categorizations. So, according to Bordeaux, these dualisms has or have positioned men as aligned with intellect and the mind or spirit, while women have been associated with the body, often the subordinate and negatively connotated term in this dichotomy. The next one, we have materialism. So Bordeaux argues that knowledge is embodied, produced by a standpoint, by a body that exists as a material entity among other material entities. This view places her within a materialistic framework, as Susan Hickman has noted, emphasizing Bordeaux's focus on the materiality of the body, often referred to as the real body. So Bordeaux's work is frequently compared and contrasted to that of Judith Butler. So Bordeaux has compared to that a body as a text to be inscribed upon and interpreted, but emphasizes its natural and situated nature within Western cultures. In contrast, Butler aligns more with postmodern theory, treating the body as pure text. Bordeaux has critiqued this approach, observing that treating the body as pure text highlights subversive and destabilizing elements while celebrating freedom and self-determination, but may overlook the material aspects of the body. Bordeaux has argued that cultural definitions of the body and its materiality must be resisted and insists that real bodies remain central to feminist analysis and resistance. And we have the last one, which is the center of So some Bordo's work, which is the feminism. So Bordo's critique of gender, particularly feminine, bodies incorporates methodologies from feminist and gender studies. She has re-examined and modified other feminist approaches, including that focus on dichotomies like oppressors or oppressed and victimizers or victim. So Bordo has noted that second wave feminism often regarded the female body as a socially shaped and historically colonized territory, a perspective that she argues frame women and their bodies primarily as passive victims within a patriarchal society. Bordeaux has highlighted newer feminist critics that focus on racial, economic, and class differences among women and examine both women's participation and patriarchal culture and their efforts to resist it. Right, so some of the notable works by Susan Bordeaux includes, we have here The Flight to Objectivity. It is an essay on Cartesianism and culture, which she wrote in 1987, and of course, The Unbearable Weight, Feminism, Western Culture, and the Body in 1993. And we have the third one, we have The Twilight Zones, The Hidden Life of Cultural Images from Plato to OG in 1997. And we have lastly The Male Body, A New Look at Men in Public and in Private in 1999. Although there were some famous work Bordeaux, but I include this for to further elucidate or further explain to you what are the content of this work and what are the basis of his study of his critique in feminism. The first one, we had The Plight to Objectivity. It is an essay on Cartesianism and culture in 1987. It is a seminal work in feminist philosophy that reinterprets René Descartes' meditations through a lens of cultural history, psychology, and feminist theory. So Bordeaux argues that the Cartesian quest for certainty and objectivity is not a neutral, timeless pursuit of truth, but rather a masculinization of thought, a defensive psychological reaction to the separation from a feminine, organic world. So Bordeaux has described the flight to objectivity as a fresh approach to René Descartes' 1641 work Meditations on First Philosophy. In the flight to objectivity, Bordeaux critiqued the stable notions of objectivity and knowledge central to Cartesian thought, which she argued have become increasingly questioned in contemporary society. She highlighted the limitations of science and the interested, even ideological nature of all human pursuits, asserting that such critiques are now unavoidable. Bordeaux proposed that Descartes' arguments should be understood not as abstract, but rather or historical, but within the cultural context that shaped them. So Susan Hickman observes that while the flight to objectivity does not directly theorize the body, it identifies Descartes' work as foundational to cultural conceptions of the body, particularly the female body. So Bordeaux examined the Cartesian dualism of mind and body, where the body is depicted as the prison that the mind must escape to achieve knowledge. So this framework informed Bordeaux's broader analysis of how cultural forces shape perceptions of the body, with particular attention to the female body. The next one, we have Unbearable Weight. It is a feminism, Western culture, and the body. It is a seminal text in a feminist theory that analyzes the female body as a site of social control and cultural construction using a post-structuralist feminist lens. Bordeaux argues that the female body is shaped, disciplined, and often destroyed by Western patriarchal ideologies that prioritize slenderness and control, translating cultural anxieties about gender into personal pathologies. So this work of Susan Bordeaux examines the body's construction and positioning within Western society, offering what Bordeaux described as a cultural approach to the body. The book analyzes obsessive body practices of contemporary culture, such as plastic surgery, extreme dieting, and rigorous physical training, framing them not as anomalies but as logical manifestations of anxieties and fantasies fostered by our culture. So Bordeaux argued that these practices illustrate how cultural representations homogenize ideas and how these homogenized images become normalized. So Unbearable Weight also explores the relationships between culture and disorders like anorexia nervosa and bulimia. Bordo contended that such disorders cannot be fully understood through medical or psychological perspectives alone, but must be viewed as complex crystallizations of culture. She argued that while these disorders may appear to resist dominant ideological constructs, they simultaneously reveal the damaging influence of cultural norms on the female body. Alright, so we have here the number three, which is the Twilight Zones, the hidden life of culture images from Plato to OG. So Susan Bordo applies the feminist lens to analyze how contemporary media and historical philosophical frameworks collaborate to colonize the human body, particularly the human body. She argues that we live in an image saturated culture where the distinction between reality and appearance has collapsed, creating a modern version of Plato's allegory of the cave where constructed images become our primary reality. So this work of Susan, it is an exploration of cultural images and their pervasive influence on contemporary society. So Bordo argued that the allegory of the cave was analogous to contemporary issues. She wrote, "For us, bedazzlement by creative images is no metaphor. It is the actual condition of our lives." Bordo critiqued consumers' culture's portrayal of idealized bodies, suggesting these reconstructed images present false ideals that viewers internalize as standards for their own bodies and lives. She advocated for a renewed concept of truth, emphasizing the importance of teaching future generations to critically evaluate and see through the illusions and mystifications of an image-dominated culture. And of course, we have the last one, the male body, a new look at men in public and in private. Alright, so Susan Burdick extends her feminist critique of cultural imagery to examine how masculinity is constructed, marketed, and experienced. Rather than treating men as the enemy, she uses a feminist lens to show how men are increasingly subject to the same disciplinary pressures of the marketplace that have long governed women's lives. So, in the male body, Bordeaux broadened her focus from examining female and feminized bodies to explore the male body from a female perspective. The book analyzed representations of the male body in the mass media, highlighting concerns about bodily form. The book analyzed representations from the male body in mass media, highlighting that concerns about bodily form and beauty affect men. Bird further examined societal attitudes toward the penis and queer culture in the 20th century. So that would be all the four writings of Susan Bordo, which are The Flight to Objectivity and Essays on Cartesianism and Culture, Unbearable Weight, Feminism, Western Culture in the Body, Twilight Zones, The Hidden Life of Culture Images, from Plato to OG, and the last one we have The Male Body, A New Look